Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my prediction for the Ezra Taylor versus Willy Hutchinson fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and feel free to join the Patreon. This is a Patreon requested video, and you can request your own of any kind of combat sporting related content, and I will try my best to get out there for you guys if you join the Patreon. You can also use the Patreon for betting tips and advice, or to just have general chats with people in the boxing community. And again, I appreciate all the support with that. And also, if you are carrying on with some possible New Year's resolutions now into late February, and you're wanting to feel good whilst doing so, this is coming out late February, by the way. It will be released onto YouTube in March. But if you're wanting to, like I say, get a good discount, feel good whilst you're training, whilst you're keeping fit, head over to grindactivekinetics.com and use code AXEL10 and you get 10% off some fresh new gym wear. Let's get straight into this one though. Like I said, this is filmed at the end of February, so things could change a little bit. There's been, a delay of the whole card so far. Of course, this being the Atalma Franklin undercard co-main event, and there's also been a couple of fights which have had, changes of opponents. I think the Shaquille Thompson fight has, the Liam Davis fight has. So again, there's been a couple changes. I'm hoping this fight doesn't get changed and this prediction is still valid to then go out onto YouTube on fight week, but again, we will have to wait and see. This is an exciting British fight though, with a good bit of needle in it. I feel like any fight with Hutchinson involved, there will be a good bit of a back and forth due to his character, his kind of comical, just taking the mick, kind of relaxed but jokey type of persona. I mean, he was able to frustrate and annoy Joshua Buatsi, and we haven't really seen that from Buatsi too much. I mean, of course, Ezra Taylor's had his own backs and forths. He was meant to fight Louis Edmondson before this fight, but of course that got changed to Steve Woodhull. But in the Edmondson fight, there was a bit of a back and forth in the build up to their fights before that got cancelled. But still, like I say, this has got a good bit of a needle. It's exciting, it's a good co-main event, and I'm here for it. There are plenty of good fights around the British light heavyweight division. The light heavyweight division isn't the most stacked, but on the British side of things, there is definitely some good names which are building themselves to get to that real world level. And I mean, I'm quite surprised to see this one happening now. I think for Taylor, this is a real good step up. He's had a couple of good wins against low-level English opposition. It could be a bit too much of a step up in my opinion. I would say low-level English opposition, maybe more English-level opposition. I mean, Troy Jones is English level in my opinion, could be area level. Steve Woodhull kind of is the same as well, but Woodhull did, of course, get a good win against Lerone Richards, but then he got stopped by Callum Simpson, and also he got stopped by, of course, Taylor as well. So again, not the craziest of levels of opposition, but Hutchinson isn't English level. He's, in my opinion, definitely better than that, and I think he is kind of just fringe world level in my opinion. I did think that they were going to remake the Edmondson fight and try again with that, but after his close fight with Lapin, there was no real talks of them trying to remake that. Maybe they're trying to make a Lapin-Edmondson rematch. Again, I'm not entirely sure, but it's a bit of a shame. I think the Taylor-Edmondson fight was a good stepping stone, and then if he'd have won that fight to then get a Hutchinson fight was a good one. But to go from Steve Woodhull, who, like I say, was coming off a loss via stoppage, to Callum Simpson, who of course we've just seen lose to Troy Williamson, to then go from that to Willy Hutchinson, who, yes, not that long ago had a fight with Buatsi and lost, but he was very competitive in that fight. Even though he got dropped twice, it was still a competitive fight in, Hutchinson's favour. Yes, he didn't do enough to win, and I didn't think he did enough to win that fight, but again, he was still, definitely in the fight and showed a lot of heart. And then, he came back, had a win against Mark Jeffers, and, made it look a very comfortable performance. To, see him then get to fight, Taylor again, it's a bit of a matchup in which maybe another fight's time I would have seen happen. But again, I don't mind them moving along these kind of prospects in Ezra Taylor quite quickly. Again, I've got nothing against that, but perhaps it could be a step too far. I'm surprised that Willy Hutchinson has been, willing and was wanting to take this fight. It is a risky fight for him to not really get too much of a reward for if he does win. I did feel after making easy work of Jeffers after his loss to Buatsi. Like I mentioned, he would have been moved back to kind of them world level fights in the Buatsis and people like that. I mean, the likes of maybe like an Anthony Yard, coming off his loss to David Benavidez possibly, or even like a Zach Parker. He's now shown he is basically world level with his fight with Buatsi, where we want to see the rematch of that. Obviously, they could be rematching that, and maybe that's why we're not going to see Hutchinson get a fight like that. Maybe Hutchinson's just been told that. Again, like I say, there's too many people tied up. I mean, we could have seen Hutchinson versus Lyndon Arthur for the European title. Again, I felt like there could have been matchups that could have benefited Hutchinson more, but, maybe this is just the one that he's getting paid best for, or maybe, like I say, there's some sort of deal going on for him to get rewarded if he does win this fight. But, of course, it's a good fight. Taylor still being trained by Malik Scott as well. I mean, it's a big name to have it with him in his corner, and I mean, I don't know if Wilder's getting trained by Malik Scott for the Chisora fight. I'm not too sure. I would imagine, but I'm not too sure. So, Malik Scott is putting a lot of kind of focus into Ezra Taylor mainly, with Wilder being out and not really fighting a tremendous amount. Pretty much all of his focus recently has been into Ezra Taylor. Again, that might have changed now that Wilder's come back and he's coming back for the Chisora fight. But still, he's a big name coach. Obviously, I mean, I'm not entirely sold of how good of an actual coach he is. I mean, he's done good with Ezra Taylor. I think Ezra is showing improvements. So again, I might be wrong. It might just be, Wilder's style, which is definitely difficult to train, which I have heard of in the past. But to speak about both fighters individually, Taylor as a fighter, he's got a good pumping jab. I would like to see him use it. He works off it well. I would like to see it use it at a bit of a range more often, because when he does, it does look powerful and it does, come with intent, but he doesn't use it at a range, as much as I would like him to. But he does also mix it up and use it in close at times after throwing a hook, which again is impressive. And he does work off his jab first as well as afterwards as well. He's got fast hands. He's got a bit more of an improved punch variation in his combinations, which was something which I noticed in that Woodhull fight. He was mixing his shots. He was coming in with a nice uppercut and it was landing clean, and his actual shots was good and his shot placement was good. I think he was picking his shots well and starting to work openings better than what I have seen of him in the past. And he is also typically, with the way that he picks shots at a mid-range, pretty accurate. In close, his accuracy isn't always the best because, sometimes he can get a little bit excited in his combinations, and then that drops the accuracy a little bit because he's not putting as much control into them. But typically his shots that he lands and he comes from a mid position to go in range, or if he is just throwing from a mid-range position, they do normally land pretty nicely. They are pretty accurate, even if they are getting caught on the gloves. He works body to head well. He moves you around pretty well. He's got that kind of physical strength, and he kind of leaves out his punches but then kind of pushes you off it, which again is a good thing. It's not like he's pushing you physically in the way of using two hands, but he kind of guides you around, I suppose is the better way of putting it. You can see that he's drilling and kind of counteracting what is predictable, which by that I mean, the likes of a Troy Jones, the likes of a Steve Woodhull do predictable things to then leave gaps. I think Hutchinson does that as well, and you can see that he works with Malik Scott well to drill that and to counteract that and to come with counters, whether that be a short kind of check hook to, catch you when you maybe throw a body shot, or, whatever it may be. Again, you can see that he's drilling and counteracting and using that well. Negatives about him, I think he stands pretty tall when he's throwing, but I would say so does Hutchinson as well. He's not really got the best head movement. He's quite tense when he's throwing, and like I say, his head movement and his body movement is minimal. I don't think he fights his best on the inside, and he can then, allow his opponents to land a bit more when he is doing that. And he, in my opinion, when the fight isn't clean and it isn't in his tempo, then he can, struggle a little bit and, like I say, get caught a little bit more with punches. He leaves gaps for his for getting caught with a jab when he is throwing, and I think Woodhull, again, was able to land his jab quite a bit when, the gaps was there. He definitely got caught more in the Woodhull fight than I expected him to, in my opinion. He could be too comfortable. Again, maybe he was too comfortable. That was a short notice opponent, and like I say, coming off the stoppage defeat, he could have just been very comfortable and just trying to, and perhaps overlooking him. He doesn't always turn up the tempo enough, in my opinion. Like I say, perhaps just being too comfortable. He does not always, he pushes his jab to then be a powerful jab, but then when he follows after it, it is just kind of grazing the arms of a lot of the opponents that he's dealing with, especially if they have their hands high, which Hutchinson doesn't always, to be fair. But if he could really push that follow up straight afterwards, it could be a real punishing shot. He doesn't really take much of a back step, and then he gets, landed on and he gets caught. And I mean, there's times where he'll drill it and you can see that he is taking a bit of a backward step, but he's not moving off afterwards. He's not circling off, or most of the time he isn't even taking a backward step in the most part. And I don't feel like he always fully commits to his punches. He could come with more power and could land with more intent more often if he fully committed to more of his punches. He's starting to do it a little bit more, and I think that confidence is coming there in his ability to be able to actually really hurt opponents, but it's just not quite fully there yet. And I don't actually know how powerful he is. He looks like he would carry a lot of power in his build and his frame, but again, I'm just not really seeing it too much so far. Hutchinson, as a fighter, he's got good timing. I think his timing is really good, and that's excellent in my opinion. He plants his feet well. He's got fast hands. He's got a solid timed hook, which after making space, taking a couple steps back or a step back, he then, like I say, chops and lands that nice hook. It's something in which you can tell he's probably drilled a lot, and it's, again, a real nice thing. And I think his timing on the front foot and the back foot is just very impressive. He moves well, he can circle off well, he'll confidently move well, and throughout the fight, if he can have success, he'll grow in confidence and he'll move better and better, in my opinion. He manages his range pretty well for the most part as well, flicking out the jab. It's quite a sneaky jab. It comes from that low position. Again, I don't always like fighters that throw from a low gap because, you're heavily relying on your reactions and your ability to get out of bad spots if you are. And it's also taking out the power of the jab, I feel, when you are throwing it from low, because it's not allowing you to put your full kind of shoulder into it. But, it's a sneaky jab. It's hard to see and you can throw it quite quickly, and that's what he does do with it. He turns you off if he gets on the ropes at any point, which is, again, something in which I feel like he does better defensively with his movement than that of Taylor. He can fight at mid-range or in close with his combinations, and he's throwing them. He's comfortable. He mixes up his power with his combinations, and he works angles well, and he works angles as well if he hurts you, whereas I think Taylor, if he hurts you, he's a bit more, wild, trying to get you out of there, whereas Hutchinson can step off and try and work his angles, like I say, to then land better and then to get you out of there. And in general, he's thrown from quite complex and complicated and difficult to time and to deal with angles, and he has heart as well. I mean, the fact that he was able to get dropped twice against Buatsi and then still come back to be able to have a competitive fight, and also he got a point deduction that could really demoralize you, and he was also getting caught to the back of the head quite a lot. That really wasn't talked about much. He was getting caught to the back of the head quite a lot, and the ref didn't do anything about it. All of these things could have really dampened the morale and the hope of Hutchinson, but it didn't. He still kept coming, and like I say, he actually made it a competitive fight, and I'm pretty sure one of the judges actually had it in his favour. If not, I think it was a split decision in the end. So, he made the fight a lot closer to at least the judges' scorecards than maybe, the fans. But still, like I say, he showed a lot of heart, in which we haven't really seen from Taylor just yet. Negatives about him, of course, like I mentioned, he throws from a low position. He leaves quite a lot of gaps when he's throwing. He's got a weak guard, and he can be relying on his reflexes too much at times. They're not bad, but they're not anything too crazy. It's not something in which I would, recommend for him to rely on. His physical strength isn't as good as that of Taylor. You're not really going to see him moving around his opponents and things like that, I don't believe. Can be at times, he can be at times too passive, where he's just kind of waiting and walking around and trying to act too casual and too relaxed. But then he can have times where he's too aggressive, and then he can get caught and landed on. And because, like I say, he's leaving so many gaps, he is there to be counted on when he is turning up the tempo a little bit. But again, like I say, there's times when he's too relaxed, and you can see him trying to just walk off things and leaving more gaps and open spaces. When he got dropped the first time by Buatsi, it was literally right after he kind of just strolled off and tried to just disengage by just walking off, and then Buatsi sprung in, caught him with a hook, and it just completely surprised him and hurt him and damaged him, and then he wasn't really the same after that. And so, again, there's times where he's either too aggressive or not really aggressive enough. I don't know if he's always able to find that balance where he is, like I say, defensively being smart, but also being able to land punches. He's been hurt to the body. I think he's a little bit weak to the body. I think I feel like Buatsi found something there, and Ezra might be able to time and land a couple of good body punches, which could hurt Hutchinson. And when he does start taking shots, his body language really isn't that good. That's why I was surprised that the decision actually went a little bit closer into Hutchinson's favour, even though he still lost a Buatsi fight. Just because his body language really didn't look the best, even if he wasn't particularly hurt. You know, his body language is either really good in fights like the Jeffers fight where he was being really confident, you could see he was just having fun in there, or the Buatsi fight after he got dropped twice. Like I say, a lot of things wasn't going in his favour, but his body language just looked really poor, and, you know, he was landing back with stuff, but then, you know, anytime he got backed up, his body language just looked really poor. Again, I don't know if that was just because he was hunched over because he was more wary of getting caught to the body. I'm not too sure. But again, we will have to wait and see if Ezra Taylor lands anything on him in this fight, you know, how he's going to be looking, how he's going to be reacting, because the judges look at a lot of that as well. Who do I think is going to win this fight? I think Willy Hutchinson is going to be able to win this fight via a unanimous decision. This could be a fight that goes one of two ways. Hutchinson can box, uses speed, uses movement, and cause problems to Taylor that Taylor's never really been used to, and that could catch Taylor out to then become a little bit more defensively irresponsible, and that could possibly happen. And like I say, Hutchinson could easily frustrate Taylor, in my opinion, and like I say, use his movement well, or Taylor could time Hutchinson with a nicely timed shot, and, you know, catch him when he's perhaps being a bit too offensive, or, you know, like I say, when he's just leaving a gap, maybe being a bit too relaxed, and then Taylor could hurt him, or he could chop down to the body and hurt him. I think Hutchinson, like I say, I'm going to give him the credit of his heart and his toughness, and I hope that he's going to be a little bit more wary of the body shots in this fight. If he knows that perhaps now that's a little bit of a weakness, I'm sure he's going to be more wary of that. But I think, like I say, his jab can disrupt Taylor. Taylor, like I say, being very tense, I think if he gets caught with the jab quite a lot, it could really interrupt him and disrupt him. And then if Hutchinson can use his movement as well, then again, I think he's going to be able to win via a unanimous decision and show that Ezra, you know, he's a good fighter, but he's not quite at that level just yet. And, you know, that's okay. Ezra can rebuild. He can come back, you know. I think there's still, you know, definitely opportunities for Taylor, but I think Hutchinson, again, I still think he is in a good, you know, point at this point in his career. If he was coming straight off the Buatsi fight, maybe I would say Taylor wins this fight, but just from what he showed in the Jeffers fight, you know, that was a good performance and a real kind of solid beatdown of a tough guy in Jeffers who, you know, he was calling out Callum Simpson a lot and, you know, was around that British title level and again was undefeated as well. And Hutchinson, not to say it was an amazing opponent, Jeffers, but Hutchinson just made very easy work of him, in my opinion. Then who Hutchinson can go on to fight next? Again, I'm not too sure what's happening with Buatsi at the moment. It's a bit of a radio silence, to be fair. We could be seeing Buatsi Parker again, maybe. If not, we could see Hutchinson Buatsi again. I'm not too sure. Or Hutchinson Parker. I feel like Parker is deserving of a big fight no matter what, due to his, you know, his performance last time out in the way that he did get kind of robbed to an extent, even though I don't really like to say that. But still, like I say, he did put on a good performance and the judges didn't, you know, go in his favour that fight. And he does deserve, like I say, a good fight as a result. Or, like I've mentioned, an Anthony Yarde fight would be an entertaining fight. I think I would really enjoy the build-up of an Anthony Yarde versus Willy Hutchinson. And for one last rebuild for Anthony Yarde to get another title shot, why not? I mean, Yarde looked vulnerable in his last fight, and Hutchinson could maybe counteract that. And, you know, if Hutchinson gets a big win, if he even stops Taylor, again, he's not a massive name for him to have on his resume, Ezra Taylor, but it's still a good name-ish. And so, you know, the Anthony Yarde fight could possibly happen for, like I say, a rebuild of Anthony Yarde. But again, I'm not too sure what happens with Anthony Yarde's career. I feel like we've never really known what's going to happen with that. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.